Greetings, everyone. This lesson today would be the first of 3 lessons for May the 5th. That is also known, by the way, as Cinco de Mayo in Mexico, and you will see Cinco de Mayo on signs and so forth all around town. If it were normal times, I'm not so sure how much you will see of that this year, but here in America we like to celebrate along with Cinco de Mayo, the holiday that is enjoyed in Mexico. And so all the Mexican restaurants will be having specials and fun times. So anyway, so happy May to you. I can't believe that it is May. Our calendar is just blowing right along, even with being homebound like we have been. I let a very important event slip up last week. On the 28th of April, our class member, Asok, celebrated a birthday, so happy birthday to you. And I hope it was a good day, even though you might not have been able to do exactly what you wanted to do. But I hope you still had a good birthday, and we are glad that you were born. And we hope that you have a great year ahead. Today we're going to start another one of our ESL library short units. This one is about the Underground Railroad. That's the Underground Railroad. You may have heard about the Underground Railroad. I suspect that you have in your reading about American history, perhaps in some of the travel that you have done around the country, museums that you have visited, and certainly living in the South, there are a number of opportunities where this part of history is discussed, and so I don't think this will be altogether unfamiliar to you. I want to give you just a little bit of background, and then we'll look at some vocabulary. You will be receiving the packet of information with the article for you to read in an email. I'm also going to include a video, one of many hundreds of videos that you might wish to view, but I'm going to send one that will give you some more background and with some wonderful pictures and so forth that I think will help to bring this period of time to life a little bit more for you. It is a study of a very difficult time in American history. We're looking at the period of time that preceded the Civil War, and primarily we're looking at the 1800s. So if you can kind of think about 1800 to 1865, which is when the Civil War happened in the United States, those were the years that slavery was still very much an accepted practice by many states in what was then the United States. And in particular, slavery was quite commonly expected and accepted in the South, in the southern states. Now, I'll be showing you a map in just a few minutes that will help you to see that the configuration, the way the states were at that time arranged, is slightly different than today. So, but you'll see on the map that I'm going to show you the portion of states that were considered the northern states, the portion that were considered the southern states. And that is in reference to how the country was divided during the Civil War. The Underground Railroad, first of all, was not a literal or a real railroad at all. It did get the name railroad because during that time in history, in the early 1800s and to the mid 1800s, railroads, literal railroads, were becoming a mode of travel and of transport here in the United States. So the concept of railroad being a network, if you will, of ways for people and things to be moved. So that's where the word railroad comes from. Underground, again, is not literal. We're not talking about beneath the earth. We're talking about secretive. So underground refers to secretive. So secretive transport, underground railroad, secretive transport. And it was a network. It was a large network that consisted of people who were able to actually hide slaves who had escaped from plantations and wanted to escape to the north for freedom. So part of the network then involved human beings who were willing to put their lives in danger to bring escaped slaves into their homes and hide them. They might hide them in a secret room in a basement. They might hide them in a secret space in an attic, or they might hide them somewhere on the property, again, in some sort of a space that was created for this purpose. And the people who would provide the hiding places would also, of course, provide food, other necessary resources, perhaps warm clothing, sometimes some money, items that, the slave or the slave family may need in order to continue their journey. Could even have been certain tools such as a knife or these kinds of things. Think about making an escape journey and you can imagine the kinds of things that you might at least hope to have with you. And so the people who opened their homes and helped did provide necessary resources to the escaped slaves. They also connected the slaves by using code words, by using pictures, to say, when you leave this place, you will travel in this direction. Here's what you will see along the way. You must stay close to the river, or you must look for these particular dwellings, homes, and it will, if you will follow the plan and this guide, you will arrive then at your next safe place. Another word for that is a safe haven. A haven is a place where someone can stay. A safe haven is a place where the slaves could know that they would be cared for. Some of these slaves were fortunate enough to make it to the northern states where they could live freely, because by this time there were most of the states in the north, or over this period of time, most of the states in the north had begun to abolish, get rid of slavery. So the slaves were directed to certainly to the states where they would be the most welcome and the most safe. And when they arrived at their destination, they would be able to actually come completely out of hiding. They would be able to walk into that state and into that town and not have to hide anymore, which I think would probably have been a very just overwhelming thing to do when you have been hiding and hiding and hiding for days and weeks and even months. To suddenly be free and to be able to just step right in to a particular community of people. Certainly there were many slaves who did not survive their journey in the Underground Railroad. Disease, weather, injuries. There were so many different things that it could certainly get in the way and block entirely the escape route or the possibility of escape. Certainly some slaves would arrive at various homes along the network of safe havens, and those homeowners would provide them with medical care that they needed before they could go to the next stop. There were babies born. There were many things that occurred. Families separated and trying to find one another. We also know that many slaves escaped without their entire family together. This was because the family would often decide among themselves, if you have the opportunity to leave, please go. We will find you someday. Very hard to imagine. It's kind of like, our modern day refugees from all over the world. People agree among themselves within families that they may have to separate in order to find their freedom. So we know that families in many cases never were able to come together or reunite again. Also, we know that many slaves who escaped were immediately caught. If not immediately caught, maybe a few days or weeks, but the word among the plantation owners, the slave holders, the word would spread that these particular slaves have escaped. Here is what they look like. Here is what their clothing, probably looks like. And they would pass the word that to be on the lookout for these escaped slaves. And so many slaves were caught, and then they were beaten, tortured, starved to death, killed. So many slaves did not actually survive the journey at all and didn't get very far at all. It's a fascinating study. There are so many books that have been written that tell the journey of individual slaves in the cases where the stories were handed down. The stories were told and told and told again, so that eventually they were written, and those stories we're able to actually read today. So I would encourage you, if you find this fascinating, to do research about individual slaves who escaped through the Underground Railroad and who lived to tell about that. I do want to show you this map, so I'm going to pull this up, and I'm going to send this as a document to you, so that you will have it. Oops, I just hit the wrong thing. Sorry. Let me go back here. All right, so I'm going to try to hold this up, and you can see in the dark blue, those are the states that were considered the northern states in the year 1861. Some of them were more recent to 1861. It still allowed slaves, but by 1861, slavery had been abolished in those states. The medium blue color, Kentucky and also Kentucky and Missouri, those states were considered northern states, but there were still some slave owners. And then the states in gray were the southern states, and those were the states in which obviously slavery was still very much a part of the lives of large plantation owners. And when I say large plantation owners, I'm talking about the very big cotton plantations where cotton was grown by the, acres, many acres, very, very large. And the owners would be quite wealthy. They would have a beautiful home. We call those antebellum homes, and there are still antebellum homes all around in the South. It was primarily those large plantation owners who kept slaves. However, slaves were kept in less wealthy homes. They were also kept by shop owners, other sorts of tradespeople. For instance, someone who might have been a blacksmith. A blacksmith is someone who makes tools out of heavy metal like iron and steel. A blacksmith would have had many slaves helping in his industry. So it wasn't just the plantations, although that's where the largest number of slaves would have been kept, but also in businesses and in other homes, on smaller farms and this kind of thing. All right, so I'm going to pause. I'll be right back, and we'll look at a few vocabulary words that you'll encounter as you read. I hope this introduction will help to prepare you for reading about the Underground Railroad.